before we get there, we may not have time to get there today, Ken Flo. Georges St-Pierre is returning to the octagon for the first time, I think, since October of 2013. You always thought that this was going to happen, and maybe I should have trusted you when I had my doubts over the last few years. What are your expectations for George, and, how soon might this actually come to fruition?
I do know he has been training throughout this whole process. He's been training since the beginning. First of all, he's a martial artist anyway, but yeah, I always figured that he went out a little bit too early, that he did want to continue to fight. I'm nervous for him, man, because listen, in just 2 years, we've seen the sport evolve a very long time, and he's been out since 2013. So I hope that he's been keeping up with things. I think he has. And for Georges St-Pierre, obviously, I only see a big fight in his future. I don't know if it's going to be him going for a run at 170 pounds. I think it's going to be, more super fights that interest him. I think he deserves it. He's been in this game a very long time. He defended that belt for a very long time. I'm excited for him. I'm nervous for him as well. But I know that if there's one guy, when the lights come out, it's Georges St-Pierre. The guy, when it comes to competing, he's as good as it gets, a phenomenal athlete still. I hope his body is healthy. I think it is. And I don't think he would do something, if he wasn't 100% ready. So I think he's ready. I think he's in a good mind space. And, for a lot of fighters, for myself and a lot of other people, when you take yourself out of the game, you see the game in a very different way. It's almost like being on the battlefield and then being up on the hill looking down. You just see it in a very different way. And I think that Georges St-Pierre is going to have a very fresh perspective heading into the fight game now. And I think it's going to serve him well.
So in terms of what he's doing this for, I mean, certainly there's got to be some financial drive there, but you have often said that if you were to come back, and I don't know when our last conversation was about that, but you wouldn't want to fight a guy outside the top 10. I mean, so is there a championship aspiration here, or does he maybe think that the UFC middleweight champion, Michael Bisping, at present is a beatable guy who happens to have the belt? I mean, Georges St-Pierre right now, if that's the fight, and that is the fight that is the betting favorite to come together, Georges St-Pierre would be favored to become the UFC middleweight champion.
Yeah,
no?
I think. I think it'd be a tough fight. I mean, Michael Bisping is going to be a tough out for anybody. He's going to be bigger than Georges St-Pierre. He's a guy that's been extremely active, and that might be the fight that gets put together. I think that for the UFC, who would want to have Georges St-Pierre in there as one of the faces, as one of the champs, one of the guys with the belt? And I think that might be one of the things for the UFC to say, hey, yeah, you come back, we want to see you take on a belt holder. We want to see it at 170, or we want to see it at 185 pounds. So maybe that's the choice that's been given to him, but I suspect it's a fight that Georges St-Pierre feels he can win, and he wants it. So I'm really interested to see who they match him up with. I know Anderson Silva is the one fight they want to see, but I don't know if I want to see that at this point. I feel like that's a fight that should have happened a little while ago.
I tend to agree with you on Silva. I think ultimately there is a window and there's an argument to be made, and I think George would see it as a winnable comeback fight. I'm not sure it has the stakes that he's looking for. I want to inject Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson into the conversation here just because that is probably the fight I'm most looking forward to this year. It's been a fight 3 years in the making. Undeniably, there should be championship stakes when those two guys fight, given that one's 24-0 and one has won like 92 in a row in the UFC, right? So all of that being said, a fight between Georges St-Pierre and Conor McGregor is absolutely massive. Yes, absolutely massive. I mean, I don't know how many pay-per-view buys you're talking. Is that a bigger fight than Mayweather-McGregor? I don't know that I can take that leap, but I think it's damn close. I mean, who's not watching Georges St-Pierre, Conor McGregor? So, again, they have options, right? Those guys can carry pay-per-views on their own, but is that not, we used to say Cyborg Rousey was the biggest fight we could make in the UFC. Is the biggest fight we can make right now at present not Georges St-Pierre versus Conor McGregor?
Without a doubt. That's the biggest fight in UFC history right there. I mean, you look at Georges St-Pierre and what he brings to the table. He was pretty consistent at around 1 million pay-per-view buys, is what I was hearing. And we know what Conor McGregor is bringing in. He's past that right now. So Imagine a $2 million buy pay-per-view in the UFC between those two. I think that's a very realistic thing. And with the way the UFC's been doing things, they haven't been waiting around. They've been trying to go for the big game kill right away. They've been trying to put together the biggest fights they can as quickly as possible. That might be the fight. I mean, that's a really interesting fight, man. I would love to see it because Conor McGregor, when it comes to, being able to catch guys when they're trying to take them down or catch them from in close, he's as good as it gets, man. He's a different kind of striker. Now, can he stop that double leg of Georges St-Pierre repeatedly? Can he stop Georges St-Pierre from advancing position in his guard and where he can get a submission? I don't know. It's a fascinating fight. I'm really curious to see it. I don't know if we're going to see it right off the bat, but we just might. We just might, and that might be a nice consolation prize for Conor McGregor if he can't get Mayweather.
Yeah, no, you're right. And maybe you do wait. Again, Georges St-Pierre's not coming back for a one-off. I mean, there's always some risk, even calculated risk, when you don't strike when the iron is hot. But, part of the reason I bring up Khabib and Tony is because there is that competition angle, right? And I understand that one of those guys certainly deserves an opportunity to fight Conor to become the undisputed UFC lightweight champion. But you know what? Michael Jordan's coming back to MMA. There's just not a whole lot you can do. I mean, Yoel Romero might get screwed by this. You don't know exactly who is going to end up on the wrong side of this GSP comeback. But, when one of the consensus greatest of all time, I think this is a guy who actually many now consider, because of Anderson's recent run and John Jones's inability to make the walk. I think a lot of people, there's steam now that Georges St-Pierre is the greatest of all time. And whether he's 1, 2, or 3 in that conversation, Michael Jordan's coming back. And unfortunately for Khabib or Tony, it might delay the winner's shot at Conor McGregor. And Nate Diaz obviously is still in the mix as well. But I don't know, man. I would like to see Conor and Georges St-Pierre. I really think that it would just be that type. It would be like De La Hoya Mayweather. The whole world's watching. 2.5, 3 million pay-per-view buys easy. So we'll see. So Sarah McMahon, nice win by her. And I read an article on SureDog.com today that said maybe someone like Raquel Pennington next. I think that fight makes a ton of sense. In terms of where they are. I know Sarah McMahon is talking about Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko. I still think she's one win away. I think a fight with Pennington, even though she's sidelined after having surgery, I think that has a lot of legs. Derek the Black Beast Lewis. A big part of his run here in this heavyweight division, I think it's 6 wins in a row now, has been dealing with some adversity, whether it was on this night against Travis Brown or getting in an early hole in a weird fight against Shamil Abdurrahimov. And Derek Lewis has rallied through that. He showed you that he is more than just power. He's an underrated grappler still, and he's got heart, and he's got a lot of it, and he's very tough. He's got a mean streak, never looking for a way out of there. And Travis Brown certainly had his chances here, but it goes into the books as you saw it, Derek Lewis by knockout.
It's just a boo-boo, though. Yeah, I mean, Derek Lewis is the man, dude. I was really impressed. And to keep that kind of a schedule as a heavyweight, man, is very, very impressive. And you heard him, what he said. He's going to take at least 3 months. He doesn't want to hear anything about any fights for a little while. He's kept a very busy schedule. He's taken on a lot of tough guys. I think he was very disappointed by his last performance. And Travis Brown, listen, Travis Brown is a lot more experienced than him. He's probably technically a much better fighter than Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis, though, got him to exchange with him, and he had to rally back from those body shots. Those front kicks from Travis Brown were doing great work once again. It looked like he was going to get Derek Lewis out of there. Derek Lewis was able to gut it out, no pun intended, and and get the win. I landed some big shots, that uppercut. And that shot right on the forehead of Travis Brown just knocked him down. That was the beginning of the end. And listen, Mario Yamasaki, he's one of our buddies. He's one of our boys. Good guy. But he was very late on that stoppage. And I hate seeing it, especially with heavyweights. A guy take, 2 or 3 extra shots. And he was just very casual, breaking up the fights. And I didn't like that, but an excellent finish for Derek Lewis, and look forward to seeing who they match him up against in the future.
Yeah, Travis Brown took one too many, so he's lost 3 in a row, 4 of his last 5. And again, I still think there are big fights for Travis Brown. I still think that there's a place for him in that top 15, but I think this was sort of one that he had to have, and he didn't get it. And we'll see what they do in terms of matchmaking Derek the Black Beast Lewis, but he has a lot of support. I mean, you saw after the post-fight interview, Anthony Rumble Johnson tweeting like, that's my favorite fighter. And I had a similar thought. You know, I didn't watch the fight until the morning after. Nice having that night off. I was in bed early, but it was, I mean, he's just a character, dude. Like, you look at his Instagram, I think he walks that line. He goes right up to that line, and maybe in some instances he crosses it, with Instagram post of him, pretending to masturbate like on fight day that his buddy I mean, there's he goes right up to that line, sometimes crosses it, but he has this mass appeal thing down, at least right now, and people want to see him fight, and they want to see what he has to say.